And it's a key event for us in making sure we are able to reward and recognize the most compliant taxpayers. But also the fact that we recognize that every citizen is a taxpayer, either directly or indirectly. This year, of course, given the circumstances that we are working with, we have been able to make a few amends to match the current situation that we actually have. And this year, the theme really is celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda. Celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda is our theme, and one would want to know why that theme. First and foremost, the key thing for us to appreciate is that paying taxes is a civic responsibility for every citizen who is involved in an income-generating activity, or is involved in a business, or in gainful employment. But most importantly, the theme, celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda, seeks to endear, to engage, but also to bring out the fact that we are equally responsible as all Ugandans, regardless of where we are located. The principal thing is, regardless of where you are located, how much are you able to contribute as part of your income, as part of your business income, as part of your personal income? The key thing is making sure that we are able to mobilize Uganda. We also realize that in order to achieve this, we must get the message across the country. You realize that during the times of COVID, where we've been, we've had a lot of challenges. The country is spending a lot. I'm sure as journalists we've seen that Cabinet had to pass approximately, I think, about 52 billion to make sure that the schools can open safely. Now, the question is, when we see all these things, whose money is this? So I really want to appreciate the taxpayers who have continued to facilitate the running of business, but also most importantly, making sure that we can actually open the economy, we can actually open the schools in a safe way. So that's very key for us, and as our media houses, we really want to thank you, and we pray that we'll be able to take the message across. Let us appreciate the arrival of the Commissioner General. Let's welcome him. Mr. Commissioner General, you're most welcome. We are ready for the engagement. Our program is, we're going to run it very fast. We'll have an opening prayer. After that, brief remarks from me. Quickly, we'll ask the Commissioner General to come and speak. Let me ask Jotham to lead us with a word of prayer.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's stand up for the word of prayer. Let's pray. And the loving Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for this beautiful morning that you have granted unto us, so that our strength that we will hear. As we stand before you, we pray that you give us your Holy Spirit to guide us through whatever is going to be said today. We pray that may your grace shine upon every one of us, so that we can achieve what is to be achieved in this press conference. Be with us all, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the media houses that are here. I would like to thank our colleagues who are on Zoom out there. I would like to thank our followers on Twitter, on Facebook, who are following this event. This event is live on Facebook and YouTube. And I would like to ask that we actually follow this event, and the hashtag is TPAS20 and URA Press Brief 20. So I would like to invite our friends out there for this event, particularly to pay attention to the kind of activities that we would like to roll out. For my part, I would like to say that it's been very been a challenging year, but I really want to thank the media houses that continue to support us in our efforts to make sure that we can mobilize the citizens and all the business community to continue paying their taxes. I also want to add to the fact that the country is still on its feet because we pay our taxes. So I want to say thank you very much. And now I want to go straight to the presentation of the press conference by the Commissioner General. And may I therefore take the opportunity to invite the Commissioner General. Mr. Commissioner General, in this house some journalists who are here. Of course, the rest of our journalists who are very free, we feel appreciative. We couldn't have everybody in this room just because we needed to make sure that we have a smaller number to keep compliant with the standard operating procedures. So our friends who are not here, kindly take notes. We really have wanted you here, but we just couldn't have everybody here. But Mr. Commissioner General, the press is ready to receive your address. You're most welcome.
Members of senior management team, Uganda Revenue Authority of the South, members of the media houses present here, and those that have joined us online, our followers on social media platforms. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to welcome you to this press conference, and although I'm a strong advocate for observing all SOPs for us to survive, I feel that speaking through the mask is bouncing my words back to me. And since the people in front of me are some meters away, allow me to put off my mask so that I'm more audible. And those near me, I promise I will focus in front so that there is no risk of transmission or infection of COVID-19. May I take this opportunity, first of all, to welcome all our visitors today, especially the members of the media houses who are present with us here today and those online. As a tax administration, we recognize that this year has been particularly difficult due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but at the same time, we appreciate all those that have continued to support us, especially our taxpayers who have continued to fulfill their tax obligations despite the hardships, members of the press that have supported us and have continued to communicate accurately to our taxpayers. We appreciate all your efforts, and on our part, we are doing all that is within our means to support the businesses so that they can stay afloat, and we trust that soon the pandemic will be behind us and life will be back to normal. But ultimately, we thank the Almighty God who has kept us alive up to this date. And of course, we extend our sympathies to all those families, colleagues, and friends that have lost their dear ones to this pandemic. We appreciate the leadership of our government in guiding the nation to safety. We all know that Uganda is one of those countries that are globally commended for having balanced the safety of its citizens as well as the survival of the economy effectively, and we appreciate that. We can't fail to mention our dedicated medical teams that are tirelessly doing everything possible to secure the lives of our citizens. May I now turn to the purpose for today. Today's press conference will focus on the taxpayer appreciation season, which we are launching today, and also will give a highlight on the revenue performance of the first quarter of the financial year 2020-2021, as well as the administrative and policy measures that will be put in place to collect the revenue in this financial year. First, the taxpayers appreciation season. For the last 15 years, it has been the tradition of Uganda Revenue Authority dedicate 1 month in the year to appreciate compliant taxpayers and also to reinforce the culture of voluntary compliance. In a special way, we want to thank those taxpayers who have continuously fulfilled their obligations amidst this impact of COVID-19, and it's because of your commitment to meet the tax obligations that we've been able to register positive revenue performance in the first 3 months of this financial year. We appreciate you and commend you for that. So the theme for this season is celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda. As we celebrate voluntary compliance, we shall reach out to the taxpayers in the different ways that meet safety measures necessary for us to survive in this period. In this regard, the taxpayers' appreciation season will run for a longer period than usual. That is from October to December 2020. Some of the activities that we carry out include profiling the top 10 compliant taxpayers per district, the top 50 taxpayers per region, and the top 15 compliant taxpayers at the national level. We are also running an online program called Bomba Ya Business. This entails free business development seminars which will run in the month of November, and these seminars will provide insights to businesses on how they can survive beyond COVID-19. We will mainly be featuring carefully selected experts who will offer customized business solutions. We'll have a ceremony to award the top taxpayers, and we'll have a few activities to appreciate and give back to the community for their contribution towards national improvement. So for this period, as we celebrate the taxpayers of Uganda, I want to take this opportunity to ask all Ugandans to recognize, to celebrate, and to support the compliant taxpayers in their respective districts. And also, I'd like to ask the public to look out for the online Bomba Ya Business classes and to actively participate. May I now look at the revenue performance for the first quarter of this financial year, that is July to September 2020. This financial year, July 2020 to June 2021, URA is expected to collect 19.7 trillion shillings. Please note that this is a revised budget, down by about 2 trillion from the budget, taking into consideration the impact of the COVID-19 on our economy. Performance so far. The overall revenue performance for the first quarter, that is July to September this year, the net revenue collection were Uganda shillings 4,070 billion, against the target of 2.999 trillion. This reflects a performance of 105.7%, a significant surplus of Uganda shillings 1,070 billion was posted. This reflects a revenue growth of 64.8 billion, which is approximately 1.6% for this first quarter of this financial year compared to the same period in the last financial year. I don't know if this presentation is being projected, but there is a graph that shows the target vis-a-vis the collection for this financial year. The growth registered in September 2020 was about 8.2% compared to the same period last year. August and July also had a positive growth. No, August had a positive growth, but July, June, May, and April all had negative growth because of the obvious impact of COVID-19. Okay, so I'll have to explain a little bit from the statistics. The performance of the month of February 2020 was at 90.3%, projecting a positive growth of 8.7% compared to the same period last year. March equally had a positive growth of 3.97% compared to the same period 2019. Now, from April, we started declining because of the COVID-19 impact. We had a minus 27.5%, a minus 32.1% in May, and a minus 15% in June, and a minus 5% in July. So from August, September, that is when we registered positive growth that reflected in a positive percentage of 1.4 and 8.7 respectively. Domestic taxes performance. The domestic taxes collections during the period of July to September 2020 were at 2.456 trillion, performing at 131%. UTX 590 billion above target. In addition, the domestic taxes collection registered a growth of 51 billion, which is 2.12% during this quarter compared to the same period last year. International trade tax collections. This is basically customs collections. The international trade tax collections in July to September 2020 were 1.714 trillion, performing at 138.87% with a surplus of 479.79 billion. When compared to the same period last year, 2019, the customs tax collections grew by 23.9 billion, which is a 1.42% growth. Okay, glad some statistics are being reflected here on the screen. Sector contributions to revenue. In the period of July to September 2020, 57.88% of the revenue collected was from the top 5 sectors, namely wholesale and retail, which contributed 30.66%. The manufacturing sector that contributed 23.17%. 9.3% of the revenue was from the information and communication sector, while the financial and insurance services contributed 7.69% of the revenue of this period. Public administration sector also contributed a 5.06%. There was growth in revenue of some of the sectors, especially manufacturing, which grew by 18.5%, information and communication, which grew by 20.5%, while revenue from the wholesale sector grew by only 2.3%. Significant declines in revenue were registered in some of the sectors, especially the accommodation and food services, which declined by 58.82%. The education sector declined by 31.94%. Revenue from arts, entertainment, and recreation, which declined by 55.59%, while there was a decline of 33.56% registered in water supply. The decline is, of course, attributed to the slowdown in the business of these sectors owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. Reasons for the July-September 2020 revenue performance. Local excise duty contributed a surplus of 107.87 billion, which was mainly from the telecom sector, and that is mobile money transfers, registered a surplus of 17.5 billion. Talk time registered a surplus of 12.51 billion. Over the top tax also registered a surplus of 8.27 billion, and this is because most of the transactions were done through the telephone, were done over the telephone during the lockdown season. But also there was registered increment in some of the industries, especially beer production, which increased by 7.3% over the same period. And this also posted a surplus of Uganda shillings 27.69 billion. VAT collections were also above target by 179.3 billion. Cement contributed a surplus of 28.5 billion. Dr. Imagel contributed a surplus of 17.89 billion. Wholesale and retail sector contributed a surplus of 22.56 billion, while spirits also registered a surplus of 12.8 billion. Of course, for the spirits, there was a high demand that registered an increment of about 42.7% in production due to the fact that spirit is a raw material for the highly demanded sanitizers. The other initiatives that can explain the performance of this season is the implementation of the digital tracking solution, which boosted our collections and has aided in the enforcement and tracking of locally manufactured and imported products. There was an increment in corporation tax, which registered a surplus of 35 billion, mainly attributed to URA's pursuit of alternative dispute resolution as a way of resolving outstanding tax matters. International trade also performed above target as a result of reopening the economies and the supply chain, and Uganda's imports grew by 31.89% in July to September compared to the same period last year, 2019. So imports increased by 7.4%, which explains the international trade performance. Other compliance enhancing interventions that we continue to focus on in order to increase compliance. We have taken a number of tax administrative measures which we have implemented to support the revenue generation, and these include focus on integrity and efficient service delivery. There is a new dispensation at Uganda Revenue Authority where staff integrity and efficient service delivery are our number 1 priority. We are reviewing a number of organizational structures, our human management practices to ensure that we carry out this noble task with the integrity and accountability that is expected of us. And going forward, integrity, patriotism, and professionalism are the core values that define us as the URA team, and we'll have no tolerance at all for corruption. I therefore want to take this opportunity to call upon the public, especially our taxpaying community, to support us on this journey of enhancing integrity and accountability in our service to the nation. Voluntary disclosure is another measure that we have taken. We are promoting deliberately. We are urging all our taxpayers to, on their own, without any prompting from the URA, to come forward and disclose their tax liabilities or any omissions in their tax declarations, so as to be compliant with the tax obligations in accordance with the law. We encourage taxpayers to fill the voluntary disclosure form, which is available on the URA portal, and to make payments of the principal tax only. The taxpayer who voluntarily discloses and pays the principal tax is entitled to a waiver of penalty, of interest, and any other applicable fines. We call upon members of the public and our taxpayers to take advantage of this window and voluntarily declare their tax positions and avoid paying any penalties or interest on those obligations. Of course, the story is different when URA finds out on its own without the cooperation of the taxpayer. The other measure that has greatly supported our efforts in revenue collection has been the performance of the digital tracking solution that I've already mentioned. For the last 10 months of implementing the digital tracking solution, we have registered an increase on the number of taxpayers that hitherto had not been known URA, and those that were known, we have also registered growth in their local excise duty, especially for the month of July, September. There's a table which also reflects some statistics showing the performance in local excise duty of 150% in the month of July, 144.39% in the month of August, and 145% in the month of September. And this can be attributed to the new manufacturers who used to operate informally and were not known to URA. About 20 of them have joined the tax bracket. Another about 50 registered growth in excise duty that was over and above the expected duty average growth rates, and another 27 registered growth in VAT that was again over and above the expected growth. And all this we attributed the digital tracking system. But of course, there was also revenue recovered from enforcement activities of the non-compliant manufacturers, contributed about 1 trillion shillings to the revenue collection. Of VAT and local excise duty. Manufacturers, importers, distributors, and agents are all encouraged to clear their stock of unstamped goods. The public is also encouraged to look out for unstamped, gazetted goods because they potentially pose a risk to their safety. Performance of the electronic physical receipting and invoicing system. Effective 1st of July, we started on a new initiative which is part of the domestic revenue mobilization strategy, and under this initiative we are to ensure that all VAT registered taxpayers begin to issue e-receipts and e-invoices. The system was specifically designed to improve business efficiencies and to reduce the cost of compliance through improved record keeping, ability to track and authenticate business transactions in real time, fast tracking of payment of refunds to the taxpayers using e-receipts and e-invoices, elimination of the risk of losing the physical receipts, and of course to enable URA avail taxpayers with pre-filled tax returns, which makes it easier and less costly for taxpayers to file their tax returns. All these are the benefits of this new project of IFRIS. However, we got appeals from our taxpayers that by the end of 1st October, which we had set as the deadline for enforcement of IFRIS, that they were not ready, especially those who were integrated the lockdown. Again, some of them needed to fly in their experts to do the integration. And following some meetings with our taxpayers, we agreed to adjust the implementation deadline by another 3 months. So by the end of November, we expect all our taxpayers to have prepared themselves and completed the integration process. We'll have the month of December to test and confirm that the systems are running well. And come 1st January 2021, we will start the enforcement actions for the use of IFRIS for VAT registered taxpayers. We would like to thank all those who have already registered for IFRIS, those who have already started issuing e-invoices and e-receipts, please continue. And all those who are still in the process of integration, we encourage you to continue, and we start testing out this system even much before the 1st January 2021 deadline. One other measure that has greatly improved our collections is the tax dispute resolution. during the quarter, the first quarter of this financial year, we continue to embrace alternative dispute resolution mechanism in resolving some of the disputes with the taxpayers. Significant achievements were registered in this tribunal. During this quarter, we have collected more than 100 billion from these amicable settlements. Alternative dispute resolution, the win-win solution, both the taxpayer and in the courts of law, and it is an approach that we promote and would like to encourage a number of our taxpayers who are ready to settle their tax issues to approach us, and we will be able to peacefully and amicably settle these tax disputes and save our time and costs that we normally incur when we spend so many years in court fighting to settle these matters. The other measure that has contributed to our revenue collection in this quarter has been, of course, the customs enforcement measures. Customs countrywide enforcement operations during the period of July to September 2020 led to a recovery of 14.46 billion as a consequence of 1,468 seizures. The major offenses were under declaration, it was about 67.4%, misdeclaration at 14.9%, and other offenses like temporary road violations, transit violations, and others that contributed 9.2%. I think there is a table there, there is a chart that shows the different contributions from the different enforcement measures. The public is encouraged to desist from getting involved in any of these forms of evasion and smuggling because they increase the cost of doing business and lead to the loss of business capital. Outlook for this financial year. Below are some of the key initiatives that we continue to pursue during the financial year 2020-2021. Number one on the agenda is leveraging the use of technology. We have introduced and we will continue to promote the use of technology to enforce taxpayers' experience and revenue administration. That will continue, my apologies. We have introduced and will continue to promote the use of technology to enhance taxpayers' experience and revenue administration. We are therefore putting more emphasis on the use of technology, mainly in the following areas. Intensified surveillance for wider coverage, especially of our porous borders, by use of satellite imagery, regional electronic cargo tracking systems, and enhanced cross-border intelligence information exchange. We will also continue to automate our key business processes, a number of them, including the auto-conversion of the transit entries into warehousing entries, which has already commenced in customs, and this change will lead to a reduced clearance time at arrival by over 48 hours. Instant cargo offloading and examination at warehouse, less encumbrance, clearance of cargo, and so on and so forth. The general public is therefore informed of this major change in the customs clearance processes. Another area will be the use of technology to improve service delivery. We are working on an integrated communication solution for all our taxpayers so that we can efficiently receive and respond to your queries through the different channels of communication, be it by email, telephone, social media, platforms, and all other available means, so that we can improve our service delivery to our taxpayers. We will focus and deepen our data analytics. URA going forward will be guided by data, by analytics, by intelligence to enhance our efficiencies and guide our decision-making process. Continued rollout of the projects that I've already mentioned, like digital tracking solution and electronic physical receipting and invoicing solution, and many others that we will consider appropriate to take the revenue collection to the next level. We are developing a comprehensive tax education curriculum that will improve our taxpayers' understanding of their rights and obligations. We will therefore deploy a number of technologies to educate them during this lockdown season. Most of them will be online. We have how to do it video tutorials of our services. We'll have webinars, and we'll continue to roll out these for as long as we are still constrained to meet physically, and we encourage our taxpayers to be enthusiastic and participate in these online engagements. We will also focus on capacity building and skilling of our staff. We'll continue to skill our staff and to build core specialized tax capabilities in the business areas such as tax audit, tax investigations, taxation of the digital economy, international tax, data analytics, focusing on data-driven approaches to promote revenue generation and enhancement of voluntary compliance. Stakeholder collaboration and engagements. We have already embarked on improving our stakeholder relations and engagements with both the private sector and government agencies to leverage on each other's strength in achieving our objectives. The key areas of cooperation are mainly information exchange, systems integration, and capacity development. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, in order for us to achieve all the above, I call upon all citizens to support the URA so as to grow this, our nation, Uganda, together. I would like to end by thanking our valued taxpayers who continue to do the noble and patriotic role of paying their taxes so as to build this nation. I want to thank the URA staff, who are the true combatants of this economic revolution that will liberate our country from economic dependence by raising enough revenue to manage the affairs of our nation. They work so hard, they are committed, they are zealous. I ask members of the community and all our taxpayers to support the revenue officers in carrying out this task, and also to report any diversion from doing this honorably and with integrity. I also want to thank media for your continued support towards domestic revenue mobilization and for your positive coverage of the activities of revenue collection. I want to encourage all Ugandans to continue to adhere to the guidelines and the guidance of the Ministry of Health in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic so that we can stay safe and be able to carry out our different mandates. I thank you all for listening to me, for God and my country.
Thank you very much, Commissioner General, URA, and thank you very much for the well-delivered press conference. I want to take the opportunity to remind the public that we are live on Zoom, we are live on Facebook, we are also live on YouTube, but we are also live on 3 television stations, that is BBS, Smart 24, as well as Record TV. So I would like to appreciate those TVs that are broadcasting this event live. Mr. Commissioner General, I want to take the opportunity to ask you to immediately launch the Taxpayers Appreciation Season. And for our viewers out there, the theme for this year's Taxpayers Appreciation is about celebrating the Ugandan taxpayers. So we want to make sure that let's look out for them and celebrate them, because it's the taxes that they pay that actually make it happen for us as citizens. Before we ask the questions, we'll give you the opportunity to ask the questions, but I wanted to ask the Commissioner General to do the launch, and then they can ask a few questions. So may I ask that you adjust your cameras? The rest of us, when he cuts the ribbon, someone will kindly request you to clap, and as he officially launches the Taxpayers Appreciation Season, where we want to celebrate the taxpayer across the country. So once he cuts the ribbon, we'll be able to clap us. Commissioner General, there he goes. As we celebrate the Taxpayers the Taxpayers Appreciation Season for this period 2020. That's all we want to do by celebrating the taxpayers. It's because of the taxpayers that pay that we see that. So Mr. General, you can explain to the public what the theme is and what we want the public to expect.
The theme, as clearly stated here, they are celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda, appreciating the most compliant taxpayers in our country that continue to do the noble task, the patriotic task of paying their taxes so as to support the development of the nation. I hereby officially launch the Taxpayers Appreciation Season for the year 2020.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner General, as he signs on to officially roll this out. Thank you, guys. Good. Thank you. Let's appreciate that. All right. May I kindly ask that members of the press, please raise your hand quickly and raise the question as the process goes on. We'll take the questions in one round and then we'll be able to respond to them. May I kindly ask the URA team to pass around the microphone so that the people who want to ask the questions can quickly ask. Please pass on to the microphone from Mr. Ladu.
Thank you very much. My name is Ismail Ladu, National Media Group. Commissioner General, in terms of sustainability of this performance, looking at the fact that the sector, service sector has been the most hit by this COVID-19 situation, but it also emerged as the leading revenue contributor. How is that possible? What kind of magic did you use to turn that around? Then, if you look at
sorry, Mr. Ladu, for clarity. Are you saying the service sector was?
Yeah, when COVID came upon us,
okay,
service sector was the biggest victim, was the most hit sector.
Yes.
But according to the Commissioner General, when wide reading the performance, highlighted wholesale and retail
yes.
as one of the leading contributor,
okay,
which is entirely a service sector. It falls under service sector.
Not necessarily, Mr. Ladu.
Well, if you look at people in retail,
yes,
okay, who are, suffer, but also the leading contributors there. So I just want to know how does the two happen?
Okay.
Now that the numbers are looking quite good, would you recommend revision of the target this time upwards? Because the numbers are really, impressive. It was reduced on the basis that, the numbers may not be looking as impressive as it is now. Now that it is what it is, can it be, will you recommend it being revised upwards? Then secondly, on the public administration, also being one of the sectors that did very well, also just explain to me briefly how is that possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I saw Mr. Cham. Let's take the mic to Cham before we go to Mr. Sulu.
Thank you very much. My name is Muheres from the CEO magazine. The first question is, looking at the surplus, I get a good feeling that since the economy is getting kicked back, and so would you be in a comfortable position, projections that were made at the beginning of maybe given where we sit, would you say that maybe some of those projections were very, very pessimistic, and maybe the economy is about to get to the squeeze status? I would know the squeeze status. Yeah. And then I think, of course, another perspective, of course, you being the new Commissioner General, of course, I know that URA and government agency, you implement what persons you, of course, from the lawmakers. From your own perspective as URA and other people who are on the other side of the implementation, if you were the one actually in charge of also making these laws, what are some of the recommendations that you'll be making from your own side, maybe that could fit into what the lawmakers are doing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have Mr. Sura.
Just three simple questions. One, could you confirm the revenue deficit for financial year 2020 for the report? And two, what's your assessment, operation of the increase in sector spending? Over the past 9 months. The increase in remittances and a lot of indirect measures on your performance specifically. And then two, what's your response to also question that actually declared the requirement for taxpayers to pay 100% down payment on surplus value for the private customers. The tax accrues is that the game changer for you or rather against you as well as going forward. And three, what kind of innovation did you in a way apply for performance of OT, the customer information, which have other performed last year.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Can we have the microphone this side? Let's move the microphone this side quickly.
My name is Moses. Issues on the investment. From the line of seen by many companies ready to go on compliance business. How this plan to ensure that there is a total compliance.
Okay. Yes, there's a mic.
John is my name. I work for NTV Uganda. Mr. Commissioner, I'm interested in knowing how long the provision for the voluntary disclosures will run, and is it possible to tell how much of the liabilities are as of now, or end of financial year to July?
Okay. I think let me kind of request that we respond to this, and any commissioner here can actually respond to any question.
What is it? Yes, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, I'm going to answer the first set of questions and allow my colleagues answer the rest. I think the first set of questions from Ismail and here is we're kind of overlapping because they were talking about the target set vis-a-vis the impact of COVID-19. As I mentioned to you, the revised budget based on the estimated impact of COVID on the economy put down the budget by about 2 trillion. Now, I cannot tell whether the assessment was accurate or not, but we all know that COVID is evolving. No one knows the impact it will have. Whereas it was estimated or thought that by the end of the first quarter, the economy will be picking up from the impact of COVID. That may not necessarily be the truth, because, as you know, a number of companies and businesses are still closed, others are still downsizing. So we still don't fully understand what the impact will be in the coming quarter, in the second quarter which we are in now. And yet, when you look at the target for the second quarter, they are much steeper than what has been in the first quarter. In other words, when you see the deferment of taxes, or some payment of certain taxes, or filing of returns, the government had allowed a grace period of up to September, October, thinking by that time COVID will have calmed down, business will be normal, which is not. So there is a chance that we will have a bigger impact in the coming quarter, but at the same time, there is also a chance that we will be resilient as an economy and as business entities, and we will survive this thing. And I want really to rally and call all Ugandans to try and exercise and observe the SOPs, because that is the way we may have to survive in this new normal for us to be able to carry on our businesses and minimize the impact of the COVID. So, in a way, us as Uganda Revenue Authority, we are putting out our best effort, collect as much tax as we can, and we'll be happy to meet the target and exceed it without relenting or feeling we have arrived. But we are also mindful that COVID is about what we can do, and we will take its impact as it comes on board. But there was a specific question from Ismail again on the service sector doing well. Well, I mentioned in my report key service sectors like the hotels, the accommodation, the tourism, they were all negatively impacted by COVID, and of course they performed badly. However, for things like wholesale and retail, once there was a bit of a lift on the lockdown, there was a bit of importation that came in with the opening of borders. So that created the surplus, especially in these months of July, August, and September, as indicated. For the first time, we had a positive growth compared to the previous year. But of course, the leadership of the government, which decided to allow some minimum activity in the economy. You remember everything was locked down except cargo. That must be commended and saluted for having a positive impact on the revenue collection. So all these contributed, but of course, sectors like telecoms did well because when there was a lockdown, there was more activity over the telephone, on voice, on data, as well as mobile money transactions. So that explains, and I think the detailed presentation covered this. For the second quarter target, the target is much steeper, and that's why I call upon all our taxpayers and our revenue officers to tighten their belts and work even harder for us to be able to achieve the second quarter targets. Then Mr. Mhereza also asked a question on policy, our input on policy. Yes, the Ministry of Finance are the policy makers, but I want to say that there is a very good and close collaboration between ourselves and our supervisors, the Ministry of Finance. So we have an input policy, and a lot of the COVID incentives and some of the bills that are still before Parliament had the input of Uganda Revenue Authority. We are looking at ways of supporting businesses so that they don't go under, and that's why there were things like expediting the process of refunds, deferring some of the filing of returns and payment of taxes, waiver of penalties and interest, settlements out of court. This is all to say that, there is a stressed economic environment, the businesses are struggling. Let's try to be as understanding as possible in going through this season, and when things are normal, we can go back. So we allowed the warehousing of goods so that taxpayers can take time to mobilize the taxes. Some of the restricted goods were allowed to be warehoused during the lockdown season. Enforcement measures were scaled down, and so on and so forth. We are really mindful that this question on the deficit of the year 2019, which was 3.59 billion, and the performance was 82.3%. I will allow my colleagues to answer the other questions that you raised. I didn't quite clearly fit them. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, at some point, you will allow me to step out and go for my next engagement. There is an emergency meeting at the Prime Minister's office. So that will take me and maybe one other commissioner, customs, but the rest of the team will stay behind to answer all your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner General. Let me kindly ask the Commissioner of Domestic Taxes to come on.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will take up the other two questions that the Commissioner General has not responded to. One of them is from Bernard. Bernard, the questions that we got from you, one of them will be handled by Commissioner Legal. I'll handle the other one of OTT improvement. I think the OTT improvement is majorly as a result of the heightened activity by the telecoms because of the lockdown. Many of us here have relied on the telecom services during the lockdown and even after. Schools have relied on the same. Businesses, there's so many businesses that have come up now. Different shops closed but became online businesses. And the accessing would have to be with the payment of OTT. So inadvertently, the OTT had to improve. There was a question from Red Pepper, and it was to do with e-invoicing. And he said that how are we ensuring compliance by the manufacturers? Now, the manufacturers are one of our critical stakeholders, and we have engaged them before. We now have weekly updates on the engagements that we do with them, and this is helping us get ready for the rollout. Now we are in touch with basically all of them, and this is allowing us to get feedback from them on any challenges that they may be having along the way, but also keeping the timeline in check so that we are ready to roll out by 1st January. There was another by NTV on voluntary disclosure. Now, this disclosure, voluntary disclosure, is enshrined in the law and it is open. It does not have a timeline. It's open-ended. However, because of the COVID pandemic, the management found it necessary to emphasize voluntary disclosure before we can do any enforcement or any compliance-related actions. Now, these compliance-related actions include audit, they include field exercises that enforce the law. And before we do any of those, we thought it important that we give an opportunity to taxpayers to invoke that provision in the law and take advantage of it. That's why it is important for you to embrace it or to tell the public to embrace it now, because automatically, it collapses automatically if we engage you. If we are the first people to engage you, then you cannot take advantage of it. And we can engage you through our audits of all kinds, or through our enforcement action, or through just the tabulation of our data that we have on you. So that's about voluntary disclosure. I think that's all that we have. There was also one on public administration. I don't know whether this was from Ismail, but of course, the government continued to operate even through the lockdown, and the government still spends. It has suppliers, it's spent on COVID in a number of ways. Employees still functioned, including ourselves, and therefore public administration was still expended on. The reason why public administration also performed relatively well during this period. I will take this question before I take my seat and Commissioner Legal comes up. The government deferred various taxes as a measure to mitigate the effects of COVID up to September. Unless I got it wrong, has URA started enforcement since September? Now, this was a gesture a mitigating gesture from government, and it was appreciated by both the tax collectors and those who are collecting tax from. Now, for us to effect any of the provisions or any of the measures as given to us, they have to be enforceable by law. And we are yet to receive the law that backs us for some of these measures. And so the moment we do, we'll be advised. The moment they are passed into law by Parliament, we will be advised, and we will then pick it from there. We can't do enforcement before the law is in place. Thank you. Oh, sorry about, I thought it important to let you know also, because the Commissioner General kept telling you that our target for this quarter is quite high. It's almost double what we have been collecting for this period. The effects of COVID still subsist. We still have them, and actually in some of the areas it is getting less than the desired levels. But for this quarter, we are meant to collect 4.4 trillion. That's almost double what we have collected for the first quarter.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Vicente, and thank you, our partners. Just to add, I think Commissioner General made a brief comment on the policy measures. Now, we work very closely with the Ministry of Finance, and a number of policy measures that come through. Indeed, we have consultations, we have meetings, and we have an agreement on the way forward on most of them. But in terms of the new areas that we are looking at, we know there are sectors that are doing well, but we know also there are sectors which are struggling. And the policy measures that came through, or what we call the COVID bills, where we had a number of incentives, or a number of relief measures like the waiver of taxes, the deferment of payment of certain taxes. Now, those measures have not yet come through. Those bills are before Parliament, so the moment Parliament passes them, we should be able to implement them going forward. So we are waiting on that as well. Once we get the approvals, or once we get the bills assented to, then we should be able to implement. But in going forward, we also know there are areas that are doing very well, and one of them is e-commerce. We know the number of transactions now because of COVID. Most of these transactions now are being handled via the e-channels. But most of our laws do not have a very strong legal framework to be able to tax those transactions. So looking forward or going forward, one of the areas that we are looking at and being able to revamp the laws relates to taxation of transactions via the digital economy. Because we know there's a lot of money that is coming through, most of these transactions indeed. So we need to look at the legal framework and be able to have measures or be able to have laws that are going to tax these transactions effectively. That is one of the areas that I want to point out, and I would like the support of the public to be able to support us, because it is in looking at these areas that we're able to relieve some sectors that are struggling, but then also be able to tax the ones indeed where this money is coming through. There was a question from my friend Mr. Msulwa on the issue of 30%. Yes, indeed, the Constitutional Court, in the case of fuel X, ruled that that provision was unconstitutional. However, as the URA, there's another earlier case, and that is a case of a UPMAC that was decided by the Supreme Court. The genesis to that particular case is that UPMAC also started from the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court, that time, in the case of UPMAC, still held that provision of 30% within the law was constitutional. But the taxpayer was not happy with that decision. So then they appealed to the Supreme Court. And this case went all the way, and the Supreme Court indeed considered that appeal from the Constitutional Court, and they held that provision was constitutional, and it was upon that basis that the court will be implementing. So right now, Mr. Msurwa, yes, you have a ruling from the Supreme Court. You also have a ruling from the Constitutional Court. But in terms of that, in the case of DP mark has not been set aside. So the provision for the requirement to pay 30% for disputes that are filed before a tax appeals tribunal is still legal and it is still being enforced. So until that decision is overturned, then government must comply with that. But that said, that is in terms of the matters which are before court. Going forward, I think the Commissioner General mentioned this in his speech. We are looking at ways, or we're encouraging public to find ways of how they can partner with us, how we can have a discussion around these cases. Because you notice that when the cases, the longer they stay in court, it is not good for government, but even for a taxpayer, because some of these cases indeed can't stay in the court system for even over 10 years. So we are calling upon our taxpayers indeed, if there are areas where they feel we can have a discussion. URA is open, and indeed in the last quarter, we have had a number of our cases where taxpayers have approached us, and we have had discussions around these cases, and we've been able to settle some of them. So that is the approach that we are looking for. That is the approach that we're encouraging our taxpayers to take going forward. Because even in the court systems, as you know, the backlog is one of those challenges that they struggle with. So these cases, once the tax appeals tribunal rules against them, then they file in the High Court. Then you're still in the hierarchy of these many cases. And that means that a lot of your revenue, a lot of money for the taxpayers indeed is tied up in these courts. So that is why we are calling upon taxpayers, if we can have that discussion and we embrace alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and we have an engagement to be able to resolve these cases without necessarily tying up a lot of government revenue or even the taxpayer funds within the court systems. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Before she leaves,
roughly how much, how many in terms of value we have for court?
I think you missed out.
Hey, on the same matter?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This quarter you managed to recover 100 million from having discussions with the taxpayers. How much money is still held up in tax disputes?
Thank you so much. Well, the questions I think are more or less related. Mr. Msurwa, yes, what will happen really before the courts is that if URA filed an appeal, which we have, and it goes to the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court then will have to decide really on whether they stick or whether the decision that they held is still binding on them. But because it will probably be a different panel, they would agree with their other decision or they would dissent from the other decision that was taken. So that ball really is within the hands of the Supreme Court. They will have to decide on the case of its own merits. But many times the courts indeed will be bound by the decisions that they have taken. But also sometimes, of course, they could look at a case separately. But for now, just to know that we have that Supreme Court decision that is still binding, that is still law, and that is what we are still binding with in terms of our precedents. My dear lady, yes, in terms of the court cases, yes, we have settled the cases, but of course, like I said, this is something which even Mr. Muheres has raised. We have just started this aggressively in the last few months in terms of looking at these court cases and having a discussion with the taxpayers. But of course, we still have a backlog in the case in the courts. And right now, we have about 1.2 trillion in terms of the value of the cases that are within the court system, right from the tax appeals tribunal all the way to the Court of Appeal. So yes, we still have a number of cases which are in the courts, and that is why we are calling upon the public really, if we're able to resolve, we'll have a discussion around some of these cases to be able to tie up the revenue that is actually tied up. And you notice that some of the cases really, it is a matter of having a discussion, and then we agree on the way forward. Some of the cases, there is almost no legal interpretation that is needed from the courts. And those are the ones where if it is an issue of reconciliation, can we actually have a discussion with the URA? And many times, like you say, that the revenue that we've been able to collect has been as a result of sitting with the taxpayers, agreeing with the principal, and then agreeing with if it is a reconciliation issue, and then being able to resolve this. And we are making significant progress, and we are hoping that indeed, if taxpayers embrace that, like the URA has embraced it, we should be able to make significant progress in terms of freeing up a lot of government revenue and taxpayers' funds really that are stuck in the court systems. In terms of settlement? Yes, the number of cases, it's a moving target, yes. Taxpayers, as we issue assessments, as we go out and enforce, indeed we have cases coming through. Yes, so it is true. We have almost over 40 cases that have come through in terms of the new cases being registered. But just to say as well that with the cases, they are all before the tax appeals tribunal. So that has given us, they are easier to manage because the disposal rate in terms of these cases at the tax appeals tribunal is much faster compared to if the cases were filed in the different courts. So having these cases in one place and we have a dedicated tax appeals tribunal that is able to focus a lot on all these cases, that is why we have had also progress in terms of the disposal rate being faster compared to what the cases are before the mainstream courts.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Legal Services, and we just would like to take the next round of questions. This press conference is also about the launch of the Taxpayers Appreciation Season. Remember, we are calling it a season which is spanning from October to December, and the theme, celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda. So I would like to ask the media to interest yourselves about what is it that we want to do, and let me kindly get the next set of questions very quickly from UBC.
Dennis is on from UBC TV. I wish my question was answered by Commissioner Castro, but fortunately it's still time.
No, don't mind, we have the capacity. Yes.
It's about the issue of Malaba border. You're aware, you're of course using the URA press network. There's been a concern of queues and long queues into Kenya as far as the way that's about 50-60 kilometers from Malaba. And they say it's due to the slowness of clearance at the Malaba border. So are you aware of this? I'm very sure you know Malaba 2 weeks ago. So that's right. So what are you doing to address the situation? And secondly, the issue of Malaba has been always, that it has always come up often. And then there is another alternative route, probably the one of Dar es Salaam towards Dar es Salaam to Kampala, maybe to the other side of Congo. Yes. Do you think it's high time that probably the business community within this region adopts this other route? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think as the commissioners here will address, let me answer the last question. Don't you think that's a business decision that's made by the owner of the goods? We do not determine the kind of route that the taxpayer chooses to take. However, we feel that it's necessary for them to use a route that is gazetted and accessible. Thank you. Any other question? Let's get to the series of questions. Yes, sir. Can we get the mic on the other side quickly?
No,
sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that from the group. Now, going back to taxpayers as appreciation season. Now, what should a taxpayer be expected to see this season?
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, there was a hand the other side. I will ask the commissioners to explain that. Patrick, if you will explain, what should the taxpayers expect during this period for the taxpayers appreciation season? Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, we have said it from business owners. About taxpayers appreciation, I'd like to know what specific thing are you going to give the top taxpayers that are going to organize at district, regional, and national level, apart from providing them and organizing them. Is there a special thing that you plan for paying. And then on smuggling, there were plans by URA to procure drones to monitor forest borders. I don't know how far URA has gone in procuring these drones and where they have already been deployed.
Thank you. Is that all for now? Okay, let me ask Commissioner Domestic Taxes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the questions. I will attempt them in their order. Now, you have highlighted the challenge we have at the border in Malava. However, you have attributed it to slow clearance from the URA. From where we sit, we don't see it as our inability to clear taxpayers at the desired level. The backup in Malava is more to do with the requirement to test the drivers for COVID, especially because of the amount involved. And the urgent meeting that both the Commissioner of Customs and our team leader, Commissioner General, moved out for was also in that regard. If you made your research, you find out that the drivers who are backing up that traffic at Malava are raising the issue of the high fee that they have to pay for the COVID test. That is the $65. And it is an entirely multilateral government issue. So all of us are involved, and we are trying to get a solution to that. The other one was on smuggling and the drones to be procured. Yes, it is not only on smuggling. The drones are going to be procured, and they're being procured to cater for, among other things, smuggling, but also identification of properties and rental, and also any form of non-compliance under domestic taxes. So yes, various forms. The drones are not. They are various, and they are many. They have many forms, and depending on what you want it to do, you will go on and procure that. For instance, the one that we want to work on the non-compliance are mosquito drones, and those can move in any place without being noticed and give you the information that you want. So straight answer, the drones are being procured. Taxpayer appreciation. Now you realize that we usually make this coincide with our birthday as URA, September 5th. So our month is usually September. Now this time we made it a whole season. Now over time, you notice that during that month, we go out and over the call of duty to do certain things. When you come into the offices, we make the environment more than just the officious environment they usually find. You find people giving something extra beyond just you coming for the service. You might find us offering you some goodies, for instance, when you come into the office. You may find us raffling something as you come into our offices in the different regions. You might find us involving you in certain extracurricular activities, especially outside of our offices. You might find us coming to you, visiting you, and doing more than just the education that we do in our ordinary way of working. Also understanding you, appreciating you, and bringing you to the forefront of the authorities to appreciate you. So a lot is public, and the public is encouraged to embrace what we will be doing during this period up to December. But that is not to say that that is the only season that we will be going over and above the call of duty. We, as an organization, intend to make it the norm for as long as the resource basket. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we are coming to the close. Just to add to what the Commissioner has indicated, really the whole thing about celebrating the taxpayers of Uganda is about getting to know who is it that is actually doing their best at the lowest organizational level in terms of the district. It's very, very important that we actually identify and raise the visibility of the taxpayers of Uganda. It's also very important to recognize that regardless of the amount of taxes that people pay, the most important thing is recognizing the action of making sure that the people in the lowest or the far points of this country are also recognized. It is also about the fact that the responsibility to develop Uganda is a national responsibility for everybody, regardless of where you are. So it's very important that for those of us who are in Kampala, we get to know who are the taxpayers in Moroto, who are the taxpayers in Abim, who are the taxpayers in Kabale. That's how we can actually build our nation together. So the new thing that we are bringing on board this year is making sure that we are able to raise the visibility and prominence of the different key contributors to revenue generation, at least across the country. And that's very, very important. So we'll profile them, we'll publish them in the print media gazette, as well as profiling them online to make sure that we give them the visibility. But also, most importantly, asking the public, those of us who are there, let's celebrate them because they make things happen. I now want to put this to a close, and I want to say thank you very much. If there are any media houses that need the Luganda version, we are more than ready to give that version. Are there any people, the media houses that need the Luganda version? Online. Okay. Just briefly to run through this very quickly on the Luganda version. Thank you very much. Olwaleero tubadde wano nga Uganda Revenue Authority nga tulina omukolo gwe tukola okwogerako ne bannamawulire, naye nga ensonga enkulu etuleese wano y'ey'okubanga twanjula enteekateeka namutayiika ey'okusiima n'okwebaza abawi b'omusolo, era omulamu omukulu ogw'omwaka guno gwe gw'okuba nti tujaguza oyo omuwi w'omusolo ali mu ggwanga lyonna, munnayuganda omuwi w'omusolo. Ekigendereddwa mu nteekateeka eno ey'okujaguza omuwi w'omusolo nga tugenda buli kanyomero k'eggwanga kwe kugezaako okulaga abannayuganda nti obuvunaanyizibwa bw'okuwa omusolo bwaffe ffenna, era omulundi guno ekigenda okukyukamu kwe kuba nti tusiima abawi b'omusolo nga tusinziira abo abasinga ku bannaabwe okutuukiriza obuvunaanyizibwa obwo, abasinga 10 ku buli district, abasinga 45 mu region, abasinga 15 ku ggwanga lyonna. So tugenda kutandikira ku district, tugende ku region, ate tugende ku ggwanga lyonna. Ekigendererwa mu kino kwe kubanga tuzimba obuvunaanyizibwa buno okuviira ddala wansi ku district. So kyekyo kye tubadde tulonkinga wano olwaleero. Ekyokubiri kwe kugezaako okulaga bannayuganda ekifaananyi ky'omusolo guno gutambudde gutya. Okusookera ddala twagala okwebaza abawi b'omusolo abatuukiriza obuvunaanyizibwa bwabwe, newankubadde ng'embeera tebadde nnungi gye tubadde tuyitamu, embeera ebadde nzibu, naye bw'olaba nga bannayuganda omusolo gwe tukuŋŋaanyiza mu kaseera kano gubadde mulungi, kiba kitegeeza nti obuvunaanyizibwa bw'abannayuganda okusasula omusolo babukutte kannabwala. Ekimu ku bye tulabye olwaleero nti omusolo gwe tubadde tulina okukuŋŋaanya mu mwaka guno ogw'ebyensimbi twali tulina okuba nga tukuŋŋaanya obuwumbi 2,999, naye twakuŋŋaanya obuwumbi 4,007. Ekyo ne kiraga nti twasusubamu essente ze twali tulina okukuŋŋaanya ne obutundutundu 135 136 ku 100, ekitegeeza nti twasukka essente ze twali tulina okukuŋŋaanya n'akatabalika oba obuwumbi 1,007. Obwo nno bwe yali ensuusuuba gye twafuna mu musolo ogwakuŋŋaanyizibwa mu kaseera kano. Ekintu ekirala kye twogeddeko kwe kulaga bannayuganda nti emirimu gino gibadde gitambula gitya. Okusingira ddala bw'otunuulira omusolo engeri gye tubadde gutambulamu, kituufu nti embeera eno eya covid bwe yatandika economy oba ebyenfuna by'eggwanga byatandika okutambula akasoobo era omwezi ogwokubiri byali tebitambula bulungi, ogwokusatu tebitambula bulungi, ogwokuna n'ogwokutaano n'ogwomukaaga embeera yali mbi nnyo kubanga omusolo gwe twali tusuubira twasobola gufuna. Awo twali tutambulira nga bagamba nti omusolo gwe tuteekeddwa okufuna mu mwezi ogwokuna n'ogwokutaano n'ogwomukaaga twali mu butundutundu 59, 56, 64 ze twasobola okuba nga tutuukiriza ku mutima gwe twali tulina okufuna. Naye mu mwezi ogw'omusanvu, ogw'omunaana n'ogw'omwenda ate olw'okuba nti entambula ne lockdown wateekebwawo okusumulula lockdown ate ne tusobola okugenda waggulu ne tufuŋŋaanya omusolo obutundutundu 30 mu gw'omusanvu, 34 mu gw'omunaana ne 41 mu gw'omwenda. So twagala okutwala obuvunaanyizibwa okwebaza bannayuganda. Omusolo ogusinza okuba nga gutambula bulungi kwe kusingira ddala omusolo mu domestic taxes gwatambula bulungi ne gutuwa surplus ya bilioni 5.9. International taxes nayo netuwa surplus ya bilioni 479. Naye nga surplus eno twagifunanga evaawa. Surplus eno yava mu kyetwandiise sectors za economy nga obusuubuzi obwa kojja n'obwa wholesale. Obusuubuzi bwabadde bukola bulungi nnyo. Sekta ndala yeya manufacturing ebyabannamakolero ne sekta eya technology oba ey'amasimu naye ebadde ekola bulungi nnyo mu kaseera kano, ne sekta ya financial sector ne insurance. Tulabye nti ensonga ki ezituleetedde okuba nti omusolo gubadde gutambula bwe guti. Ensonga esooka kwe kuba nti tulina ennongoosereza ze twakola ng'ekitongole, okusookera ddala n'ennongoosereza okuleeta tekinologiya nga digital tracking solution eyeyambye nnyo okuba nti abamu ku bantu abaali bepena omusolo ku luno twasobola okuba nga tubatuukako ate ne bagusasula bulungi. Enkola endala etuyambye okutuukiriza obuvunaanyizibwa buno kwe kwongera amaanyi mu kuba nti ffe nga tutambuza emirimu gyaffe tuli balambulukufu era tutwala obuvunaanyizibwa okwongera mu mpeereza yaffe eri bannayuganda. Ekirala ekituyambye y'enkola gye twateekawo ey'okweroopa oba ey'okuvaayo bukuukuubira n'ogamba nti omusolo mbadde sigutambuza bulungi, gye twandiise eya voluntary disclosure. Enkola eno etteeka ligiteekawo era ya bwereere. Mu nkola eno tutambudde bulungi nti era mu kaseera kano twakafuna obuwumbi nga 17 obusobodde okuba nga bujja eri abo abantu abavuddeyo bukuukuubira. Bw'ovaayo bukuukuubira ne weeroopa osonyiyibwa penalty ne fine eyandibadde nga si eyandibadde ekuteekebwako, era twagala okwebaza abo abavuddeyo era tusabe n'abo abali eyo basobole okuba nga bajja. Ekirala ekituyambye okuba nga tukola bulungi y'ensonga y'okuba nti tutaddewo akadirisa ak'okwogeraganya nnyo okuba nti ensonga ezandibadde zitwala mu kkooti mu tax appeals tribunal tetuzitwala mu kkooti oba ojja gye tuli ne tuzitunulamu ne tusobola okuba nga tufuna okukkaanya okutuufu. Ensonga eno eyambye nnyo era omusolo ogusukka mu buwumbi 100 tusobodde okuba nga tugusasula ate n'okuwuliriza taxpayer okuba nga twongedde okuba nga twongera enkolagana yaffe nabo. Ekintu ekirala kyetaddeko essira kwe kwongera amaanyi mu nkola eno eya electronic fiscal invoicing and receipting. Ono tekinologiya eyaleeterwawo omwaka guno mu mwezi ogw'omusanvu okuba nga tugatta system aba taxpayers gye bakolerako n'eya URA. Kino nno kikulu kubanga kiyamba okukuuma ebiwandiiko ate kiyamba naffe okusalawo mangu bw'oba olina kyotwetaaza naddala okuddiza ssente. Enkola eno eyambye okulaga nti omusolo naddala ogwa VAT nagwo gweyongedde mu maaso. Ku ngeri endala gye tulabyemu ekoze obulungi gwe musolo oba amaanyi ge twongedde okuba nga twongera mu kufukuza oba okunoonya abo abagezaako okwepena omusolo abakola smuggling. Era eno tulabye nti ebikwekweto ebyo bitusobosezza okuba nga tukuŋŋaanya obuwumbi nga 15 obusobodde okuba nga tubufuna mu bikwekweto ebyo. Naye nga ebikwekweto ebyo biraze nti abantu abasinga benyigira mu misdeclaration, ebintu byaleese n'atabiwandiika nga bwe biteekeddwa kuwandiikibwa oba n'atabiwa miwendo gye biteekeddwa kuweebwa. awo nno tusaba bannayuganda ti newankubadde tukuŋŋaanya ssente zino mu bikwekweto ebyo si kyekigendererwa, twagala okubasaba mugezeeko nnyo okuba nti bw'ojja n'oleeta ebintu byo okuva ebweru obirambika bulungi nnyo, kubanga essente ezo ba engasse ekuteekebwako ate etta ssente ate emala ebiseera bingi nnyo mu bizinesi. Kaakati nga tweyongerayo okugenda mu maaso, kiki kye tugenda okuteekako essira? Tugenda okuteeka essira okubanga tukolagana nammwe abantu ab'ebweru naffe mu kitongole munda okwongera amaanyi mu bwesimbu n'obwerufu n'enkola ennuŋŋamu ey'emirimu egy'abakozi baffe, era tugenda kiteekako nnyo essira. Ekyokubiri kwe kwongera amaanyi mu nkozesa ya tekinologiya. Enkozesa eno ya tekinologiya egenda kwongerwamu amaanyi okulawuna ebifo byonna ababadde bakukusa ebyamaguzi bye bayitamu nga tukozesa tekinologiya nga drones ne electronic cargo tracking system. Tugenda okwongera amaanyi mu kuautomatinga ebintu bye tukoleramu. Akati katugeze n'ebintu ebiva ebweru ebijjira mu regime gye bayita transit bwe bijja mu warehouse, awo twataddewo tekinologiya nga kibeera automatically okubanga bigenda mu warehouse. Tugenda okwongera amaanyi mu mpeereza yaffe eri bannayuganda. Tukimanyi bulungi nnyo nti mwagala okubanga ebintu byammwe bitambula mu bwangu, biva mu system zaffe mu bwangu. Ekyo tugenda kiteekako essira. Ensonga endala kwe kuba nti twongera okusomesa abantu. Tukizudde nti abantu abasinga baagala okusasula omusolo naye oluusi tebamanyi buvunaanyizibwa bwabwe na buyinza bwabwe bwe bukoma. So tugenda okwongera amaanyi okusomesa bannayuganda omanye nti olina n'obuyinza ogamba nti omusolo gukerekeddwa si gwoteekeddwa okusasula, oba osobola okwebuuza nti lwaki mumpadde guno si bwe guti. So tugenda kwongera amaanyi mu kusomesa bannayuganda. Tugenda okwongera amaanyi mu kukozesa kye twandiise okunoonyereza mu intelligence n'okukozesa data okubanga tukozesa obukugu obugendera ddala waggulu okwongera amaanyi. Ne enkola zino endala ze tutaddemu amaanyi nga digital tracking solution ne ifris tugenda zongeramu amaanyi nga tweyongerayo mu maaso. Waliwo n'okuzimba obusobozi ne capacity y'aba taxpayers, eyo nayo tugenda gyongerako amaanyi. Ekisembayo tetusobola kukola mulimu guno okujjako nga tukolagana n'abantu nga mmwe abali ebweru, ebitongole bya gavumenti ebyenjawulo, okusobola okuba nga twongera tekinologiya yaffe amaanyi n'okusobola okuba nga tuzimbagana n'okuba nga tukola omulimu guno bulungi nnyo. Twagala okwebaza okutwala omukisa guno okwebaza bannayuganda nti ebyo byonna bye tweyamye okukola tetusobola bikola okujjako nga tukwataganidde wamu nga bannayuganda okuba nga tutambuza omulimu guno. Njagala okutwala omukisa guno olwa Uganda Revenue Authority okwebaza bannamawulire ne bannayuganda abatutte obuvunaanyizibwa naddala okulaba nga batuukiza obuvunaanyizibwa bwabwe okusasula omusolo. Ate mu ngeri ey'enjawulo okwebaza bannayuganda okuba nti newankubadde embeera eno ebadde yakanayokyani eya COVID-19 waliwo ekirabibwako nti bannayuganda ate batutte obuvunaanyizibwa okulaba nti obulwadde buno tebutukosa nnyo. So twagala okwebaza abasawo, twagala okwebaza gavumenti okusobola okuba nti eto obuvunaanyizibwa okutaasa obulamu bwaffe. Tusaba mu kiseera kino ekiddako nga tugenda okuba nga tutandika akaseera ak'okucelebratinga bannayuganda, wajja kubeerawo okusomesa online webinars ezigenda tutandika omwezi ogw'Okumu, muzeenyigiremu okusobola okuba nti bafunawo okuwagalwa okusobola okukola obulungi bizinensi ate n'ogiganyirwamu. Mwebale nnyo, mwebalire ddala. Bannaffe abadde batugoberera ku mikutu egy'emitimbagano, mwebale nnyo, mwebalire ddala. Ebibuuzo byammwe ebisinga tujja kugenda mu maaso nga tubiddamu eri abastaafu baffe abali ku mitimbagano egyo. Thank you, and the press conference is hereby closed. I want to appreciate the members of the press. I want to say thank you very much for your support and for the time. God bless you.